Hey everybody, I hope you guys are doing well. So I wanted to come to you guys with, I'm trying to make it quick, a quick video regarding the death of King Von. Now he was a Chicago rapper. He had moved to Atlanta a couple years back. He was pretty much blowing up, and his life was cut short early Friday morning. And I wanted to talk a little bit about it. Now, some of you will immediately be like, girl, listen, you are 45 years old. What could you possibly tell me about King Von? Okay, you can possibly know who he is or listen to his music. First things first, I do know who he is. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and tell you I listen to his music. I do not. Okay, my son knows who he is and listen to him, right? And I try not to look at situations like this and say, well, okay, or just kind of like wave my hand at him like, oh, well, whatever. He wasn't part of my generation. I ain't got shit. I try not to look at things like that because I do see a lot of these young folks feeling a type of way. And I remind myself of how I felt when Tupac was killed, right? When he was shot and he ultimately died from his injuries. And, you know, and try not to just completely blow off this newer generation simply because we don't understand them. Because there was a time where our parents didn't understand us and while we were feeling the type of way when, like I said, when a Tupac was killed, right? I didn't understand when my mama was falling out all over the floor when Marvin Gaye got shot by his daddy. I'll never forget that day. She was passing out like it was just very, very dramatic in my mind. I remember that. But that's how she felt about somebody in her generation dying tragically. The same way I felt about Tupac and how these kids feel about Von. And shit, I could actually name a whole bunch of them in this generation because they leaving here. They leaving this earth so early, this generation. If it ain't the guns, it's the drugs that's taking them. But like I said, I try not to negate what they feel and just to try to relate as best I can, and I don't know, talk about it in a way that folks in my generation can understand, right? First things first, King Von came off the South Side. He's from O Block. If you don't know what that is, it wasn't called O Block when I used to go over there. Now, I used to go over there when I had a couple of clients back in the 90s before I started teaching. It wasn't called O Block. It was actually called Parkway Gardens. And it was rough over there back then. Okay, we didn't want to go over there back then. So Lord knows the way it is right now. Okay, we wouldn't be going over up and through there. Okay, you could not get me to do that. But a lot of these young men came from that ilk, and that's where they from. And you have the Dirks, you have Chief Keef, and they all kind of came from that, that area. And Von was signed to Dirk. Right, he kind of brought him up under his wing, and Von has made a name for himself. He has blown up, I would say, over the last year or so. Last Friday, early Friday morning, reports came out that Von was shot. Now, originally, they were saying that he was shot by the police, and it came out later after the video surfaced that Von was actually shot by, they were into it with some rivals or somebody else, somebody named Quando. Don't get me started. I don't know Quando Rondo. I don't know his music. I just know his name, Quando Rondo. Okay. And him and Rondo were tussling in the street. They did not have a gun. I mean, they were actually fighting the way you would want people to fight without guns. When one of Quando's people shot Von, and if you're watching the video, which I'm not going to show, they pull up with, I guess Von's people pull up with the car, drag his body, which almost seemed lifeless at the time, into the car, take him to the hospital where they say he succumbed to his injuries during surgery. And it's a tragedy nonetheless. And when this happened, I saw a lot of people get online and say, well, you know what? You live by the gun, you die by the gun. He met his fate. This is the life he lived. And that's kind of how I want to approach this. Not to be offensive, because that's not my goal, but it's also my goal to be as real as I possibly can when I'm speaking on this kind of stuff, because we cannot ignore that. If you've know anything about Von, if you listen to anything about Von, if you just listen to him talk, and that's what I have done over the weekend, is sat back and watch some of his interviews and set him talk and just even dare to listen to a couple of his songs, right? All he talked about was killing and shooting folks, right? And to be fair to him, he actually lived the life he rapped about. This wasn't one of those things where you had these rappers out here pretending to be gangsters, pretending to be, you know, this and pretending to be that, and they really wasn't. No, Von really was that dude. Von, from the time he was young, was in and out of jail, right? He skated past some cases. He skated past some murder cases. So you do have to sit here and think to yourself, did his, you know, the sum of his life eventually catch up to him? I remember Von specifically a few months ago when FBG Duck was killed out there on the Gold Coast on Oak Street, and him and his people was laughing at the death of this man who left behind kids. And so when I saw these people making comments online, was like, well, shit, I mean, how can I feel sorry for this dude? He done made somebody's mama childless. He done made several people's mamas childless. So how can I feel even remotely sorry for a man who, that his whole life was about that? He was a killer. He was a killer. And I say, listen, I could still feel something for anybody that lose their life, because at the end of the day, I'm a mother, right? At the end of the day, I'm a mother. I can still feel something about that. That don't mean that I don't necessarily agree with what they're saying. I think that it's a little insensitive, but you know, the Twitter and the internet is a very insensitive place. People are going to say what they want to say. This is a picture of Von and Chief Keef, and who came from O Block, right? Who came from over there, and how different their lives have turned out. You had a couple of knucklehead little boys who Chief Keef technically kind of brought in that, what they call that drill music, and kind of blew it up, right? I ain't saying he invented it, but he kind of put O Block on the map where everybody knew O Block, O Block, O Block, right? Parkway Gardens to me. Chief Keef eventually moved off to LA, and you don't hear shit out of him. Now, he's still making this music. He's still doing this thing. He's still making money, right? He's found a way to parlay it and do some other stuff, but you don't hear shit out of a Chief Keef. He kind of just lay low and do his thing. Von, on the other hand, was still kind of repping and doing that shit and doing that stuff that kind of put a target on his back, so to speak. Again, mocking dead people, mocking people for dying and getting killed. Chief Keef, like I said, you don't hear shit out of him. He plays little video games. He go about his business. He didn't even let 6ix9ine goat him into no bullshit. When 6ix9ine was trying to goat Chief Keef didn't take the bait, right? And now you see the ending here. You had a Von who was not killed, obviously, by anything that was going on in Chicago. No, but trouble found him down in Atlanta, because if you still a part of that ilk and you still doing that shit and you still being out there, shit gonna find you. It just is. And that's unfortunate, because he left behind a family and a grieving ex-girlfriend, you can say. This is Asian Doll. And over the last few days, people have been kind of like giving Asian Doll a hard time, because after news broke that Von was killed, she was publicly grieving, and a lot of people are uncomfortable with that. Now, me personally, let people grieve the way they want to grieve. Who am I to sit here and say that she's being sincere? She's not. I think she's hurting. They weren't together at the time of his death. Matter of fact, word on the curb is that he had cheated on her. He broke up with her on her birthday. But you wouldn't know that based on how she's grieving, right? Because she's saying, I want to die now, take me with you. You know, a lot of people think she's being overly dramatic. Again, who am I to judge and say that she is or she isn't? Everybody got a right to feel how they feel, right? When something happens. Now, the reason why people are giving Asian Doll grief, they're giving her a little bit of a hard time, is because of some words that she spoke a few weeks back, okay? She out here, as people are saying it, grieving, falling out, and all this other stuff. She's not doing okay. She would have went to heaven with them. She would have went with them. We said we was gonna die together. We'll die for each other. All this other stuff. And people are reminding her that she just a few weeks ago said that she can't date nobody that ain't got at least 3 bodies on them. That is, if you ain't killed at least 3 people, taken the lives of at least 3 people, I can't talk to you. And a lot of people are reminding her of what she said. And reminding her, like, why are you crying and falling out and saying, I want to die too, when you knew what he was and you yourself was promoting dating men that had those kind of pasts and that did that kind of shit. So how can you sit here and possibly be upset and sit here crying and rapping his lyrics and pressing record and crying all over the internet when you yourself said you like to date killers? It wasn't me asking the question. I'm just saying the internet was asking that of her because they didn't understand how she could be like that, how she could be all like, oh my gosh, I want to die too, but also promoting the idea of dating a man who killed, who got bodies, right? I don't know, y'all. It's a lot. It's a lot. And I just say, listen, the girl, she got a right to grieve. You know how these young folks be. These young folks, that's all they know is the internet, a lot of them. And while a lot of these things would be private for us, we would grieve in private. We wouldn't get on the internet and just be bawling our eyes out and stuff like that. That's not what they know. They only doing what they know, right? They only doing what they know. And, but I can't help but I can't help but to say, well, they do have a point, right? Here it is. Please have at least 3 bodies before you talk to me, boy. I like killers. So you're sitting here saying that you like killers. And maybe not necessarily understanding that killers do get killed. All right? I ain't specifically talking about a King Von here. But killers usually have a pretty short shelf life. So if you're sitting here talking about you like killers, why are you getting all crazy and acting out because a killer, a former killer, was killed, right? They're not matching here. But grief doesn't do that. You can sit here and say one thing out of your mouth and not necessarily mean it, but then when it show up at your doorstep, you feel a little different. And that's kind of what happened here, right? She sat here weeks ago and said she liked killers, and now tragedy has struck, and now she's talking about, I want to die, take me with you. I wish that she understood like a lot of us older folk understand, but that's why I wanted to talk about this, because this can be a lesson. I wish that eventually her and others like her will understand that when you bring that kind of energy into your space and talking about you want to date a killer, that eventually those killers get killed. I was always told that there are 2 ways out for folks that live a certain type of lifestyle like that. You're either going to be judged by 12 or carried by 6. You pick. You choose. All right? Because if you keep going down that path, there's only 2 pathways for you. And so when something like this happens, it's tragic because, again, he left behind, he left behind a little boy that's just kind of a little over a year old. He left behind a baby, right? Just a baby. But he also, I think, understood, if you listen to his music, if you just kind of listen to like some of his words, just kind of watch some interviews, I think he understood that he was going to have to pay the piper eventually. I think that a lot of these men understand that. Hell, listen, the men in that kind of crew, in those groups, they have lost so many of them. They have lost so many of them. This is his baby's mother pretty much saying that he kind of tried to prep her for the fact that he wouldn't be living a long life. So I do think that he knew that eventually it would have to catch him, that it was going to catch him eventually. And that's just sad. It is sad. Am I allowed to feel even a little bit of like sorry for a person who I think had talent and could have taken his talent much further? Am I allowed to feel sorry for the fact that when he had this scuffle and he had this fight in the street, he actually didn't have a gun in his hand and he was fighting what we call heads up, actually fighting with fists? Am I allowed to feel even a little bit of sadness for a mother who, although her son has taken the lives of other people, now she got to bury her own? I don't know. I just think it's human nature. I think it's human nature to just still, even in the midst of maybe not, I don't know, seeing it like, okay, he has done this to other people, so naturally it was going to happen to him, but still seeing it as a tragedy because we see it all far too often. We just know him, right? But this shit happens every day. This shit happens every single day, which is why sometimes I can't even turn on the news. Every day is somebody getting shot and killed. A lot of them be innocent, but it also be some folks that just a bullet was waiting on them because they've been out there doing some bullshit and they was out there doing shit. And you can't, a lot of times you can run, but you can't hide from that. If you've been out there doing dirt's going to find you. It's going to find you. And unfortunately, that was Von's ending. It found him. It wasn't something that was from Chicago, right? It didn't like it just traveled down, but it did find him. And that's just kind of how the universe works. You put that shit out there, it's going to come back to you, which is why if I could say anything about this, just speak life. Speak life. Speak life. Because I do believe that you can manifest certain situations and certain stuff. If you constantly talking over death, if you constantly talking death, guns, kill, you know, you mocking the tragedy of other people, that shit will find you, you know. And then I see Asian doll out here like giving, again, she grieving, giving out booty advice, telling girls to hold a nigga down, you know, if he out here doing some dirt, stay with him, don't give up on him. I'm just like, listen, I'm just going to kind of give her a pass because she's grieving, but please don't follow her advice either. Don't follow that bullshit advice. That is not what you want to do. How about just don't date killers? Don't date certain men, because don't think for a second that you think that shit is cute. Don't think for a second that it won't show up at your doorstep. Okay? Because she could have easily, had they been together, she could have easily been with him that night. Right? How many times do we hear about young girls being in the car with they dude and he been in some shit, and then they shoot up the whole car with her in it, the baby in it, all kinds of shit. Don't, you know, listen, all I can say from this tragedy is to speak life always. Don't speak death, speak life. And that, you know, if you're going to involve yourself in that kind of lifestyle, know that your time on earth is short. And like I said, I can't emphasize it enough. If you're going to involve yourself in that kind of lifestyle, know that there's only a couple of ways out of it, right? Only 2 ways out. Judged by 12 or carried by 6. And I think that a lot of us can sit here and say we know somebody or we knew somebody that had that fate. So, you know, my prayers do go out to the people that he left behind. I do. But I can't help but wonder if, you know, this was just something that was going to happen based on this lifestyle. But I don't know. Those are my thoughts on this situation. Like I said, I wanted to be sensitive about it because I know that people are hurting, but I also didn't want to ignore the fact that this was his life. And this is the kind of energy he put out to other people. All right. And sometimes you don't know when that shit's going to come back to you. But it's unfortunate that such a talented man has lost his life. But let me know y'all thoughts. I didn't want to make this long, but I did want to talk about it. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Take care, y'all.